From our Frontline series, please welcome our host, Chérie Johnson. Chérie, please take it over.
Thank you, Jack, so much. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. Next slide. Today's event is hosted by the Panasonic Veterans Business Impact Group. Our group's objectives are to bring our employees together through networking, mentorship, and community engagement, while leveraging our own unique military experience and leadership skills to foster better collaboration within Panasonic's workforce. Further, to recognize our community of employee veterans, alongside the family and friends of military veterans who support and encourage one another through shared experiences. In bringing together our unique background of military service, leadership, and dedication, we hope to capitalize on these strengths to better serve our companies, communities, and customers through veteran recruitment activities, career development ideas, professional development, growth, and retention. The Veterans Group is open to all Panasonic employees that are interested in joining. If you are a United States military veteran, please reach out to us to self-identify. We'll display the email address at the end of this presentation. Next slide, please. So introducing everyone to our Veterans Leadership Team members. First, Joe Howry is the executive sponsor of the Veterans Business Impact Group. Joe is a graduate of West Point and served in the United States Air Force. He's currently the Vice President of Supply Chain at Panasonic North America. I am Chérie Johnston. I'm the current president of the Veterans Business Impact Group for our group of Panasonic North American companies. I've been at Panasonic Avionics, our aerospace division, for over 10 years now. My father, my father-in-law, and my former spouse were all United States Marines. In 2010, our son founded a nonprofit organization to recognize and acknowledge the sacrifices of our U.S. military children, which I'm still the volunteer CEO of today. Finally, for over 5 years, I've been an official community partner to the United States Army. Next, Jared Darensberg. Our group's vice president, Jared, is a former United States Marine. Jared not only served multiple combat tours, but also upon exiting the U.S. military, he carried on working overseas as a contractor for the U.S. State Department. Jared's been with Panasonic Connect for over a decade, having entered through a special military veteran recruitment initiative. Jared is currently the vice president of the Veterans Business Impact Group and a passionate advocate for our U.S. veterans and this program. Next slide, please. Ali Enzon, based in Japan, is our Veterans Group Secretary, and Rick Fry, a former U.S. Marine who works with me at Panasonic Avionics, is our treasurer. Both Ali and Rick, work at Panasonic Avionics. Next slide, please. As I previously shared, our Panasonic Veterans Business Impact Group spans across several companies, and we're honored to be joined by additional leaders, our company commanders, from Penna, PASA, PAC, and Hussman as well. Thank you to Clint, Jillian, Alex, Robert, and Scott for volunteering to serve. Next slide, please. So today we have a very special guest presentation from a nonprofit that is performing incredible good works, the Headstrong Project. We're joined today by their team members, Ned Fries, Matt Crease, and Robin Myers, all U.S. veterans. Now, without a moment's hesitation, I'm going to turn it over to them. Thank you.
Ned, if we go to the bio slide, please. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having us on behalf of my colleagues and the Headstrong Project. The opportunity to talk to fellow veterans and supporters of the military about our very important work is really valuable, and we appreciate your time. So quick bio, I won't get into the details, but I'm both a retired Marine and a retired first responder. I've been with Headstrong in a couple of roles. I'm now the Chief Operations Officer. For about 2 years prior to that, I was at Starbucks Corporate, where I led the corporate strategy to support the military community and the first responder communities. And during that time, I pivoted Starbucks efforts to focus on mental health, which I saw as the biggest need that Starbucks could have an impact on, support the military community. And during that time, I got to know the Headstrong Project as a funder, and somehow I ended up here in this role. It's an absolute pleasure to come to work every day. I work with some great people, and the work that we do on a daily basis could not be more important. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Robin.
Hi, my name is Robin. I have been with the Headstrong Project for just over 2 years as well. I'm currently serving as the Deputy Director of Care Coordination, which I'll get into. I'm also one of our clinical partners within our network, and I do see clients individually. I've been a social worker since 2015. But in addition to my work here, I currently serve as a traditional guardsman with the New Jersey Army National Guard, and I've been serving since 2012. And I'll pass it off to Ned.
And I'm Ned Fries, the Director of Corporate Partnerships. I also am an Army veteran. I served as an airborne combat engineer stationed out of what is now Fort Liberty here in central North Carolina. Prior to coming to the Headstrong Project, I spent 10 years in military veteran job placement and discovered the Headstrong Project through a former coworker earlier this year and decided to join their team as they seek to expand their services nationwide. Matt, back to you, sir.
Great, thank you both. So to give you an overview of who we are and what we do, we provide mental health care that is focused strictly on trauma. And one of the advantages and hallmarks of what we do, it is confidential, it's obstacle-free, meaning we will get you into treatment very quickly, and there's zero stigma attached to this, because going back to the confidential part, we don't have to report back to anybody. We don't accept insurance payment. It's free of charge to the people in our care for the first 30 sessions. So we don't have a reporting requirement to anybody. So that allows us different advantages that other people like the VA and other health care providers might not be able to provide. And who we treat, we were originally founded to treat veterans, but since then, we've evolved and we treat active duty, Guard and Reserve veterans and family members whose service member is in our care. I won't go through all the details on that slide, but you can see where we practice and where we focus is strictly around trauma. It does not necessarily have to be PTSD or moral injury from combat service. It could be adverse childhood experiences. It could be military sexual trauma. It could be things that happened earlier in your life that were then came back because of your service in the military. But we do focus on trauma, and we don't get into other things that people might need care for. And Robin will talk about that in a few minutes. If we go to the next slide, please. So why do we exist? PTSD, unfortunately, it's always been a part of military service. And since the war started in 2001, you can see the depth of the problem that's grown with the current generation of people who have and are still serving in the military. So when we talk about 20% of those 3 million people, that is a lot of people who need treatment, over 700,000. And that is not only something that affects the veterans, it affects their family members, it affects their ability to transition effectively into the next phases of their life and be successful in what they do. So the size of the population that needs treatment far outpaces what treatment resources are available. We can move to the next slide, please. And we want to get into just the dark and serious details. You look at the rate of veteran suicides and how many people we have lost since 9/11. You put that into scale, 17 times more veterans have committed suicide than we've lost in combat operations since 9/11. And when you talk about 7 in 10 come back from the military service with some degree of PTSD, anxiety, or other combat-related trauma, that's a lot of people who need our help. You go to the next slide, please. And the reason why we've transitioned to support active duty, Guard and Reserve is that the resources just aren't there. As the military has moved away from major combat operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, the budgets have decreased, and the funding that is now available is focused on operational needs. So we've seen the reduction across all of the services in the availability of care for active duty, Guard and Reserve. And we also have the advantage, not only because active duty members can't find the assistance they need within the military healthcare structure, we also have the advantage of being totally confidential. We don't have to report back to the commands. People don't have to worry about their reputation or the security clearance if they come to see us. So that those are just a couple of the reasons why we've seen this increase with active duty, Guard and Reserve. A couple of the other data points here, give you the idea how this impacts military connected communities. And then I just want to emphasize here that this isn't limited to people who have served in the military. Mental health and seeking mental health treatment, fortunately, has come into a better place in the last few years, whether we want to chalk that up to the pandemic or younger generations who embrace this more readily, whatever it is, there's more people out there seeking mental health treatment, which is an upside. The downside to that is we simply do not have enough providers. You can see the data point on where we're going with the shortage of providers, which makes our work all the more important. And I'm going to turn it over to Robin now to get into the specifics of what we do from a clinical perspective.
Thanks, Matt. So I'm going to talk about how do we address these issues and how do we help clients really triumph over this trauma. As Matt has mentioned, at our core, the Headstrong Project provides expert trauma-focused mental health treatment to veterans and active duty service members. We provide this through a concierge level service, connecting each person to a therapist in their community who gets it and knows how to treat it. So what does that actually mean? In general, the process that a client will go through is a lot different than if they were trying to receive services through different organizations or just on their own. Over 93% of the Headstrong Project clients attend at least 3 therapy sessions as a result of this concierge level matching and our amazing clinical partners. To put this into comparison, the APA reported that at least 20% of clients end therapy prematurely. I'm going to talk about our clinical partners shortly, but to start, I want to discuss what we do and kind of like the road that a Headstrong client will take when entering care. So at the top, you'll see that, the initial phone intake is offered within 24 to 48 hours. That means after a client reaches out to us, they receive some kind of communication, whether it's email or text or a phone call, within the first 1 to 2 business days. They will go through an initial assessment with a care coordinator. And what we are really doing at the Headstrong Project, that's where those care coordinators are kind of getting a feel for what is this client looking for and what's going to be the best match in terms of a therapist. We will then connect them with a therapist. They'll have that initial evaluation. The therapist is making sure that they are a good fit and that this is the right time for them to be entering in trauma-focused care. And then the therapist uses evidence-based treatment to help treat that client and have them get better. Before we kind of talk about the clinical partners and move to that next slide, I want to draw your attention to the success rate and the numbers at the bottom. And although they seem really low, I'm going to talk to you about them. These numbers are based on clients who have received a minimum of 15 sessions or were identified as completing therapy. So these percentages represent clients who showed statistically significant improvements. It can be really hard for us to find kind of exact comparisons looking at other organizations or just kind of like in general people going to therapy. But in general, out of individuals who enter treatment for PTS, about half of them will show some kind of improved response, but that doesn't mean that it's a significant improvement. When we look at our response rate in terms of just looking at clients who have some kind of response that's improved, the number is actually a little bit higher at 67%, have some kind of like decline in symptoms. What we mean by no longer meeting clinical criteria for PTS, anxiety, or depression is that these clients are no longer experiencing symptoms. As some of these individuals are still in treatment, like these percentages are expected to increase as we continue to kind of collect and analyze this type of data. Next slide, please. So how do we do this? our clinical partners are bread and butter. They use different evidence-based practices, primarily EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, cognitive processing therapy, also known as CPT, or PE, which is known as prolonged exposure therapy. Over 25% of our therapists are actually trained in 2 or more of these modalities, which is really impressive because that means that, as you see in that third bullet, they really are the experts and they're the top notch. When you are going to one of our clinicians for trauma-based care, you're going to get a clinician that understands trauma, understands how it impacts the person, impacts their family and quality of life. In addition to having that clinician be a trauma expert, they are also culturally competent. So when you're going to, as a veteran or a service member, if anyone has gone to therapy, you may have the experience of spending 20 minutes of your session explaining what chain of command means. These clinicians, you're not going to have to do that. You're not wasting any time in therapy explaining what you mean when you're talking about military related things. All of our clinicians are qualified. What that means is, compared to the VA, where you get a lot of new clinicians that are just coming out of care or coming out of school and getting those clinical hours, our clinicians are licensed and they've already had that experience. In terms of diversity, we're constantly trying to improve this, but something that I like to always point out, we are a unique organization in that clinicians reach out to us to become part of our clinical network. When you talk to other organizations, they're constantly trying to recruit and find clinicians, whereas we're having the opposite effect of we are actually interviewing every clinician that comes and is part of our clinical network to make sure that they are a good fit for what we are looking for. On the right side of the slide, you're going to see kind of like our state expansion map. So all the states that are in red means that we have currently clinicians that can see clients in person or via telehealth. The states that are in that orangey color, that is where we are expanding into. Right now, those states, we do have telehealth options just with clinicians having license in multiple states, but we're looking to expand into those states to have in-person capability. And then that light yellow color means that we do have telehealth options, just nobody that is in person that can see them in person. And then a slight improvement, I just found out today that we actually hired a clinician that is licensed in South Dakota. So we are now down to just having Mississippi as the only state that we are unable to serve anybody either via telehealth or in person. And I will pass it off to Ned.
Thanks, Robin. So Robin just alluded to it in that last slide, but our 2024 endeavor is Mission Any Veteran Anywhere, and that is our hope to be able to start adding in-person care in more states, growing by 2 states a year for the next 5 years, as well as very soon, hopefully, adding Mississippi so that we can provide telehealth services to veterans across the country. And what we're asking of you, you've taken time to hear a little bit more about us today. All of this information will get shared through Chérie at the end of the call so that you'll have the links. But if you'd like to donate, you can do that. We'll have both the URL and the QR code available for you. If you or someone needs care, we'll share that link as well as information on how to refer or how a clinician can reach out to us if they'd like to partner with us. And then, of course, opportunities to lend a hand. We do have the email there, the info@theheadstrongproject.org, but my email address directly is just my first initial and last name, nfreeze@theheadstrongproject.org. And of course, I'll make sure that gets shared with Chérie as well, so that y'all will have this information as you need it. And Chérie, I think I'm going to pass it back over to you for the Q&A piece now.
Okay, I'm back. Thank you so much. So I see that we have Jason and Rowana on for sure. So I'm going to let them, if they want to ask a question, we'll open it up. If you guys can put it in the Q&A. And Rowana, actually, I'm glad you're here. I'm going to call her out. She was a Marine Corps spouse. Her husband was a Marine as well. And Jason is actually responsible at Panasonic North America for our social impact. So I'm sure that they'll both have questions for you, but I'm going to kick it off. It's okay. While you were talking, I was making notes. I think one of the things I had originally spoken to with Ned about that for me was huge about your specific organization was that confidentiality piece. And for those that are not part of the military community or a veteran or family member child, can you explain that more so that the just the average civilian employee would understand that why it's important in a lot of those cases that they don't want to seek help because they don't want the command to know about it. And I've seen that so much, and how that might affect their security clearance or things of that. So can one of you explain and speak to that further?
Yeah, the military's perspective on seeking mental health treatment and even offering it to their members has evolved. I want to give them credit, and it's come a long way since I joined the military in the early '90s. It's that we're in a much better place as a community, but that doesn't mean reputationally it can't affect who you are if your unit members, people you work with, find out that you're seeking mental health treatment, because there's frankly still a little bit of stigma and people are going to look at you sideways. And is this person okay to fly the jet next to me or operate the heavy equipment or firing weapons next to me? Am I okay to be in a life and death situation with this person? So a lot of the stigma is still there. And then from a professional perspective, it can affect your security clearances and your ability to perform certain jobs like fly aircraft. So that's why the confidentiality, it's a two-part reason why it's very important to the people who come to see us, and we're very rigid about that.
So it actually, for you all, when they come to see you, it stays outside of their command. They're not notified. Or if they're a veteran with the VA, does that get reported back to the VA, or does that stay confidential too?
Yeah, no, we don't report back to the VA. We collaborate and cooperate with the VA, and we'll cross-refer clients to each other, but we do not report back to them. And we also, because we don't accept insurance from anywhere, we're not beholden from that perspective.
Wonderful. So when they get the treatment, that's something that's covered through your donor base to the nonprofit, is actually covering those program services for them to be able to seek that care outside the system.
Yeah, we're 100% donor funded. That's why conversations like this are very important to us growing our ability to treat more and more people around the country.
Yeah, to spread the word. For sure. And then my next question, and I see Jack has one too, so I'll get to that also, but how do you convince someone? I think this is one of the hardest things that you deal with as a family member, right? As a child, and it's your parent who's a veteran, or if you're a spouse. How do you convince someone who doesn't think that they need care? And this is for you probably, Robin, to go. How do you get them to get in the door? Hey, at least make that phone call. Or is there like a good starter for that conversation?
Yeah, that's a really great question. While I'm a firm believer that you can't chase clients and force them to change, having kind of the limited barriers that we do for them getting into care allows them to get into care quickly and usually prevents them from changing their mind. So just getting a response right away is key. Having somebody to talk to that understands what you're saying, where you don't have to spend so much effort explaining this is my issue and this is why it's an issue in the military specifically, or explaining what trauma looks like to somebody. That is a huge barrier that they don't have to face. And then just having a clinician that they get personally matched with, that is going to be a good fit for them. A lot of the times what the care coordinators do is they will kind of assess okay, this client seems like they need a therapist that's going to hold their hand and be a little bit gentle, where we do have therapists that are kind of no BS, and we're just going to hit the ground running, and maybe clients respond better to that. So they're not having to kind of jump over hurdles to either find a clinician that has availability or meet when they finally meet with that clinician, it's like, oh, I have to stay with this person because it took me, 6 months to even get this appointment. They're not having to face that. So just kind of like not having those barriers helps people stay in care, and actually, want to be in care after they make that first kind of phone call or outreach.
Yeah, simply put, we take away every excuse that a military member can invent it very
Yes.
quickly.
Mhm.
We will get you into care very quickly. No one's going to find out that you're in care, and the people you talk to are very good at what they do and understand what you've been through.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a huge resource. I hear that even running our veterans program here, we have family members, and they're dealing with that even years and years out of the service. The veteran might have gotten out 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but it still carries forward. And I understand that. My father was of the Vietnam era. So, like you said, in moving into my husband serving in the 90s, it was such a different climate. So I think it's just absolutely amazing that you guys offer this and the avenue for people to seek care. I have more questions, but I want to address one from Jack McGinnis here. How does the Headstrong Project make veterans and active service members and their families aware of the services they offer?
Yeah, we're primarily word of mouth, and so it's grassroots. The biggest referral is somebody who's already been through treatment or in treatment with us, and they let their friends, colleagues, family members know about us. Unfortunately, because of our size, we don't want to advertise or spread the word too much. Just we only have so many slots, and our reality is we have to turn away very deserving people every day because we don't have the funding. So we keep it at a grassroots level.
Yeah, no,
But
which I
we'll
think
answer
is
a second part of that as well with the
please.
Mission Any Veteran Anywhere campaign. We're seeking to raise 1.5 million in the states of North Carolina and Ohio each, so that we can start offering those in-person clinical services in 2024. And 25% of the budget from that will be dedicated to advertising our services to potential clients. So while right now we're very much word of mouth, as we expand, we do plan to use a piece of the available budget to get the word out there to the clients that we can help.
Yeah, it's really a catch-22. I think with the military community, we all know that word of mouth is huge, because a lot of times, more than just seeing a commercial, it's an actual personal reference from a veteran. This was a good opportunity or good, service that I received. But yeah, I think you're in a catch-22 of growing too fast. You might get flooded, with so many people in need. But at the same time, you definitely need the funding and support of donors, or individuals or companies stepping up to help you out to be able to expand and offer those services. And then I was going to speak about specifically, and my son is very public about this. He's 28 now. He works for a space company as well. But when he was a military child, we never really needed to seek counseling until we did. When his father was reconnaissance and he had gone into Iraq and was in combat, and it was very obvious for me to see that something quickly was very wrong, and in that instance I called Camp Pendleton and said, hi, help, I don't know what to do, but my son is in a private Catholic school. They don't have any counseling services, and so he was able to get in there and just do a few sessions, like 3 or 4 sessions, with a combat specialist for children who was able to teach him pretty quick. Here's how you cope. Here's what's going to happen with the ambiguity of it all, because I was afraid as a parent to say it's going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. He's going to come home. I was afraid to say that. So do you guys have kind of in your service network anything for those situations? I know that our wars have drawn down, but over time, they may begin again in different areas of the world. And so for the families, do you guys have an expertise that we could send parents along to?
Yeah, so we're definitely expanding in that aspect. The primary focus is the veteran and the service member, where we feel like if we can address their trauma, then other things kind of lighten up. We want them in care first, but we do offer family services. We do have clinicians, depending on the state, that specialize in children and do kind of child-based trauma. We do couples counseling, as well as doing neurofeedback and psychiatric referrals as well. So once that veteran gets into care, that therapist is going to help and figure out like what other resources that we provide would be beneficial for them and their family. But we really wanted to look as like wraparound services for that veteran and how that kind of like impacts the family and different relationships as well. But short answer is yes. We do have therapists that specialize in kids, couples, and then do kind of psychiatric and neurofeedback as well.
Excellent. And I have a question here from Jason. Let me go ahead and read this to you. Excited to be here. Thanks everyone for making this happen. I have a question. How can volunteers, teams, or our company as a group best support your organization? I'm sorry if this was already shared. He had stepped out and had to join a minute late, but he does look forward to listening to the full recording after. But yeah, he was curious, like, how do we get people more involved with supporting you?
So I think I'll take this, and Matt, you can kind of, fill in the blanks where I might miss something. But, number one is, obviously based on what we do, there's a lot of confidentiality involved. So there's not a lot of opportunities for employees to truly get involved at the very base level. But we've worked with organizations that are doing things like hosting a 5K to raise money, or bowl-a-thons, or, since I'm not a big golfer, I love the idea of a mini golf tournament. Anything fundraising related, that really is the best way for employees to get involved. And then, of course, I will share the links later, but find us on Facebook, find us on LinkedIn, and, help us continue to grow our network. The larger our network, the better opportunities we have to connect with other corporate partners who can help us as well.
So if we're on your LinkedIn, right, or I'm on your Facebook and I'm a fan, I can share that with my entire network, correct? So yes, I would be able to just kind of blast that out and expand you exponentially.
Yes, and our marketing team of one does a very good job of putting together some very cool content with like videos, and you can see some of our client testimonials and, just different information about veterans. So it's really, from what I've seen, and again, I've only been with Headstrong now myself, not even 3 months. But as I've followed them on, or I should say followed us on the social media platforms, there's some really insightful information that's getting shared that I think it's worth a reshare.
Well, Ned, it sounds like they drew you in through through that social media impact, right? So, so we'll throw that into the recording as a call to action for all of our veterans and employees that are watching this after the fact. Please go to those social media platforms. You guys know I'm on social media a lot. Please like it and reshare it. That way it goes and expands into your network. So that's a very simple call to action that you can do right now to help them. And then it sounded like further to Jason's, I'm realizing Jason's muted. So further to his question, in terms of like someone could actually connect with you and say, hey, I want to throw a local pizza night to raise funds for you and send that over the fence, or we want to go as big as a golf tournament, as people can do some sort of that grassroots fundraising and in coordination with you to get in some funds for you.
Yes, absolutely. And depending on the location and the scale of the event, we could possibly have one of our team members attend. We're a completely distributed team. I'm in the Pacific Northwest. Ned is in North Carolina. Robin's in New Jersey. We have people all over the country. So there's potential that one of us could attend, but something like that would be absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that was my next question. You led into it perfectly. Thank you so much, Matt. And I need to call out first Robin being in New Jersey, because our Panasonic North America is in New Jersey as well. So that's excellent. You're actually local to our company there. And as I shared before, we have multiple companies within this Panasonic network, as I kind of explained to Ned. So quick rundown, I'm over here in the aerospace division. So I'm in Southern California. We're international. So we have offices all over the world. We have like 52 plus offices and locations at airports. Panasonic North America, which I know you have all heard of with the electronics and such, those are headquartered in New Jersey. We have actually automotive offices that are in both Georgia and in Michigan, and we have veterans there that you saw in that intro slide. And then we have the automotive batteries that are actually out in Nevada, and those are the ones that go into the Tesla vehicles. So a lot of people have heard of that before from the Panasonic perspective. And then we have one of our actual biggest tied into the military is the Tough Books. So serving in the military, you've probably all seen the Tough Books. Those go out in the field with you, the laptop. So we have that team here as well, and they're part of our veterans. So our veterans are really geographically dispersed, which was one of the things I liked about what you all are doing and putting up the map so we could kind of see where you're located at. But in terms of a headquarters, there's not a specific headquarters. It's more just you guys are able to create this amazing network remotely through people that are based throughout the country.
Matt, I know that we technically have a headquarters address in New York City, but it seems to me that's more of a mailing address than anything. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have zero brick and mortar. We were founded in New York City, but we've since moved away from a physical presence there. And then the same thing, Robin didn't get too much into our clinician network, but they are all contracted clinicians based on their expertise, their location, their certifications. So we're a very lean organization, totally distributed around the country.
I feel like that's what you want to hear from a nonprofit, right? Though,
Yes.
I mean, all of the extra overhead expense, it's a building and we go there sometimes. So I think a lot of nonprofits would be good to kind of go that direction, is keep it agile, keep it lean, and be able to have more of the expenses to go to your program services. So that's wonderful. Okay. And one final thing we want to talk about, each of us here really with the veterans leadership has our own passionate areas, that are our focus. And like Jared, our vice president, is very passionate about the veteran transition, especially for enlisted getting into the workforce. For me, it's the suicide. And so I just want to touch on that briefly. I had a family member that committed suicide, and it was violent, so that was something that I personally walked through when I was 17 years old, and our family raised her daughter. So it really affected our life. Her daughter's 29 today. But also through my bereavement program, we have a special forces person that had been in almost 30 years that committed suicide. And so I worked with the family for that. So really, I think just want to get your thoughts on that in terms of you put up numbers and we saw them, that it's huge. That's growing, but we hear so much, I think, disinformation too on LinkedIn or on Facebook about that, is this the percentage, and those numbers where they say like 21 a day, right? And then that gets questioned, is that accurate or not? Can you guys just speak to that a little bit so we have some clear education and direction? And the second part of that, I'm sorry, is that in terms of having I think when Ned and I discussed this, the point of contact to get in touch with you all is not the crisis. The point of contact is when you need to move forward into the services, right? So it's not so if someone had a veteran family member or themselves were in that need of help, where do they go first? And then at what point in time would they follow that with you? Okay, I'll let you unpack all that.
I'll take part one, then I'll turn it over to Robin for part two. The data points have changed. We all have heard 22 kills and 21 a day. There has been some decrease, and the latest suicide report from the Department of Defense 2022, the number is about 17 per day.
Okay.
And but you're still seeing, despite the end of major combat operations, Iraq and Afghanistan, there's still a lot of things happening in the Horn of Africa, Syria, the Pacific. Things are happening, but just not at the scale. The premise was that this would drastically decrease, and it hasn't. And whether it's residual effects from the wars for the more senior people in the military, or it's younger people coming in with adverse childhood experiences or reacting to their general military experience, that still hasn't been well explained, but it's still happening. And it also, it happens in clusters. You look at active duty last month at Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota, 3 Air Force members killed themselves in 1 month. And for a small base like that, that is significant. Or last year, the Marine Corps led all services in terms of suicide. Every 5 days, a member of the Marine Corps killed themselves. So wow. It's still very present, very real, and
that's on active duty or reserve duty.
That's a combination for the Marine Corps, active and reserve.
Okay.
but the 17 a day is across the military community.
It's cumulative. Yeah, it's interesting about the clusters too. I just learned that for the first time. I was at AUSA for the Army a few weeks ago in DC and listened to one of the speakers on that. And they were speaking to that as well about Alaska. You know, they had the cluster in Alaska of people, and then they sent a team there to kind of figure it out. So yeah, I'm sorry. So I'll let you go into the next part of that of like, when do they come to you versus crisis, and you know what's the cadence there?
And Robin, before you talk on that, I think I want to call out one thing. While that number has reduced, I would say pretty significantly. I mean, from 22 to 17 is not nothing. But living as I do near one of the major Army installations of Fort Liberty, I can say that, I think what that number doesn't cover is the number of deaths due to drug overdose or over drinking or, excessively reckless driving. I personally, in my network of people, 3 people have died in the last year. None of them were technically suicide, but all of them were dealing with demons that, I think affected their life in some way. So, it wasn't a specific pulling of a trigger, but it was definitely a direction they were heading. And Robin, that's where I'll let you kind of take over on where do we help?
Yeah, sure. And I do want to point out that Matt said something really key here is that although the quote unquote wars have kind of like died down, people that enter into the military have been shown, I can't remember the exact number or percentage, but majority of them have had some kind of life crisis, trauma, difficulties prior to entering into the military. And that is a reason why people do join the military, is to escape whatever it was that they were going through at that time. So they are already at a higher kind of like risk of being exposed, one, already having had trauma, and 2, being re-exposed to trauma and having that result in PTSD. In terms of where we come in, the way I like to think about what we do and how we help with suicidality and with these other kind of like substance use issues is that at the root of it is a lot of it is trauma. These are kind of symptoms of that traumatic experience that somebody has gone through. So if I'm able to help you process that trauma and help you kind of move past it, and where you're not living in it in a day-to-day kind of mindset, then your risk of suicide, your risk of using substances kind of as a coping mechanism, or taking kind of like risks in general, are going to reduce overall, because you're not going to have those symptoms of PTSD that result into the suicidality. We do have clients that come to us when they are in that crisis area, and we do have clinicians who are specialized and have specialized training for suicidality and are able to kind of address that alongside with the trauma. Same with substance use. We have clinicians that specialize in treating substance use at the same time as treating the trauma, because sometimes it can be hard to say like, okay, we're going to treat the substance use and ignore the trauma, and that's kind of like the, what came first, the chicken or the egg type of situation. In addition to when it's the best time, as a family member, if I had somebody that was hurting, I think just kind of showing them our website, and I know that sounds very cheesy and corny, but a lot of clients that I talk to, they're like, yeah, I saw the website and I was like really impressed that just by seeing it, they were able to kind of reach out. Family members can always kind of reach out and ask us questions if the service member's like, I'm not, I have this question, but I don't want to reach out. They can always reach out and ask questions at the info, or just like submit something online themselves. There is always going to be a human on the other end of that that's responding to them, and not kind of like an AI robot that's kind of just giving them generic answers. We do have a care coordination team that responds to all of the inquiries that come through, and a marketing team of one that, will spread out those emails that come to that info email chat. So as family members ask questions, and just kind of gently nudge them towards our website so that they can apply and speak to one of us. we're very convincing once they get to us. So
yeah, I think that's the
care.
key, is just get them there. But I think that's such a great idea, is maybe just gently share the website, right? It's just maybe passing that over, so it's not necessarily putting someone on the defense. Yeah. And then I know Jason has a comment I want to read to you, but one other thing, I know we had kind of a tough situation with our family suicide because there was no warning, of course, but her husband had died. So maybe the red flags were there and we missed it. But what are some of those key warning signs that, since we have you cornered, Robin, that our family members or veterans should be looking for? You know, what are maybe the little hints that people miss that's leading up to something tragic?
Yeah, any major change in somebody's personality, even if it's like, oh, they're overly kind of over the top and friendly and trying to do everything with you and let's do everything all at once. And the kind of stereotype of like isolating and turning into themselves. Any major change in how they're presenting, if they start giving things away, or get things that you would think are warning signs or things that you are concerned about. In general, a good rule of thumb is just be direct and ask somebody, hey, are you thinking of this? Like, you're never going to implant that idea into their head. And it's people, a lot of times family members and friends will be like, oh, I don't want to ask them because I don't want to give them the idea of that. You're not going to give them that idea. But having that direct question of like, is this what you're thinking of? Are you thinking of hurting yourself? It's going to be a lot harder for them to avoid that question rather than, like, hey, are you okay today? It's a lot easier to avoid when you ask kind of a generic question rather than a very direct question. So my recommendation is if anything seems kind of like concerning, ask them that direct question. You may get kind of a surprise in the response of it. And I will say, kind of as I go through this, nationally, anybody can call the line. It's 988. They made it a lot easier. So similar to 911, but 988 is our mental health crisis line. If you are not in a mental health crisis, but you feel like somebody else might be, you can also call and they can kind of walk you through what makes the most sense, depending on the situation you're in.
Oh, that's excellent to know. Yeah, you'll see, we actually have a slide for the 988 number. We put it in every single presentation that we do here at Panasonic through our veterans group. So that's great. It's excellent. But I didn't know, we say that people can call, but I didn't realize that a family member could call as well and get some direction on how to handle a crisis. That's wonderful. So I want to read you. Thank you so much for that detailed response from the team. I want to read you one more comment from Jason here at Panasonic North America. I'd like to express my gratitude for providing such enlightening information. This is all and the important work you do. This conversation just underscores the significance of the work that you're doing. I'm curious if Headstrong Project has an impact report or any publications available for review regarding the programs and the outcomes. I'm eager to delve deeper into the great work that you're doing.
Yeah, I think our best source is our 2022 annual report. Ned, do you just want to pull the link for that and send it for distro? That's the best source.
Yes, and what I'll do, Chérie, is I'll send that in a separate email. If you want to share with your entire team, you're more than welcome to. But we've got the one pager, I think, for the general audience.
Yeah,
but with what Jason's looking for, we'll make sure we get you the annual report as well. And Jason, that is available on our website also, if you don't want to wait for my email.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, no, thank you so much. Yeah, I think Jason's a little more sophisticated than the rest of us. He's with our Office of Social Impact. So I think, yeah, what he's looking for, we'll just send over the fence to him, but we'll keep the general fact sheet to the whole group. And then I'm just scrolling through here. I'm sorry, keep you for another moment. Another question from Jack, please. Is this treatment considered long-term mental health care? How often can a service member receive the treatment? Is there a cap or time frame of the treatment plans?
Yeah, great question. I will take that one. We are not considered long-term because we are considered, you're going to come in, you're going to start feeling better, and you're not going to continue therapy because you're not going to need to continue therapy with us. The way that there's no cap on the number of sessions that you have. There is a copayment that comes into play after 30 therapy sessions, but no cap kind of in terms of a lifetime form of treatment. If a client comes in, receives treatment, feels better, and maybe something happens, 2, 3, 5 years down the road, they're always welcome to come back into care for what I like to call as a tune-up. So they can come back, kind of readdress maybe, triggers or things that came back up for them. So there's never a like one and done type of situation. You can always come back to care with us if you feel the need to, but I don't like to call us long term, because our goal is for you to come in, have a lower number of sessions, start to feel better, and then no longer need our services.
And Robin, it's worth mentioning that in terms of a time limit as well, those 30 sessions, if they use 10 and say, hey, I'm good, those other 20 are still available to them 2 years, 3 years, 10 years down the road. It's only when they get over those 30 visits that copay would start coming into play.
And I will say how we got to that number is that the majority of our clients finish therapy and are considered completion before they hit 30 sessions.
Yeah, that's excellent. I was kind of wondering that myself, like, is that the official golden number? Like 30 you're cured, or how does that work out? Yeah, no, that's excellent. Yeah, that's really great. And something that I think Matt mentioned earlier that I think is just good for our general employee base, you spoke about operational tempo. And it's kind of ironic because we see that in the nonprofit world, when you're working and you're on the military bases, pretty often, or you're in that community, you can see what you might not see on the news. That the military is a little more active than I think everybody realizes. So just because you're not seeing a combat situation on your television or on the nightly news doesn't mean that there are not things still going on, that we're still having deployments. We're still having kind of those movements where people are coming in and out of separations from families, et cetera. So I think you touched on that briefly. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't always understand is, just because you're not seeing it on your nightly news doesn't mean that our military is not engaged still and busy, and having those movements around. So I think that's a good point. So I just want to, I know we're coming to a close. I want to say thank you so much, to each of you, to Ned, to Matt, to Robin. And first, thank you for today. This was so enlightening and this was really great. And we're going to be sharing the recording far and wide with our employee base. And again, the call to action was go to your social media and share it with everyone, So I think that's also the first call to action. And I will be posting the fact sheet. But individually, I just want to say thank you for each of you. Each of you have served in the armed forces. And I like to highlight this in every veteran activity we do, that is literally less than 1% of our entire nation. And there's about 350 million people here who are, volunteering to serve in the armed forces. So I just want to recognize that. It's really special that you guys all step forward to do that. And not only that, you can see that today you're each carrying forward that mission in the way that you're working with the nonprofit world to help support the people that you served with. So I think that's so commendable. And I just want to take a moment to say thank you and recognize that for each of you, because it's really a big deal to the other 99% of us who didn't serve, who were able to stay home and just go to work. So I want to highlight that and then say thank you again for coming out today. And if we could go to our next slide, please, we'll just do a few closing remarks. So just a gentle reminder, if you're a military veteran, please reach out to us to self-identify and join us. Or if you're simply interested in supporting the cause and becoming a member, just reach out to us as well. All Panasonic employees are welcome to participate in our Veterans Business Impact Group community. Next slide, please. And as promised, this is our crisis line. We have this slide. We love it because we've got our Belgian here. And again, if you're in need, or as we learned from Robin today, if you're a family member that thinks someone is in need, call 988 and then press 1. Next slide, please. So thank you again to everyone for joining us today and or listening to the recording after the fact. And we hope you all have an excellent rest of your day.